Now, a new analysis shows that the 6-ton iconic altar stone at the heart of Stonehenge originated from northeastern Scotland rather than southwest Wales.
Stonehenge stands as one of the most iconic prehistoric monuments on Earth, an ancient circle of stone pillars rising from the fields of Wiltshire. For nearly 5,000 years it has endured, silent, weathered, examined by experts, and surrounded by mysteries no one has been able to fully unravel. But what if much of what we believed about Stonehenge has been completely wrong? Recently, researchers used cutting-edge, AI-enhanced 3D scanning technology not only around the site, but deep underground. And what they discovered is shaking the archaeological world to its core. Beneath the surface lies a huge ring of enormous pits, each one large enough to fit a small house, arranged in a perfectly measured circle stretching more than a mile across. These pits were constructed over 4,000 years ago, yet remained totally hidden until now. And the deeper the scans went, the stranger things became. Patterns, structures, and entire lost landscapes emerged, buried not only in Britain but across the globe. Civilizations never documented, engineering far beyond what we thought ancient cultures could achieve. Designs that hint at something far more advanced or far more deliberate than traditional history acknowledges. Now, one unsettling question lingers. What were they really creating? Before we uncover what the scans revealed, hit like and subscribe, because some believe the real truth behind Stonehenge was never meant to surface. The unexplained giant pits. Near Stonehenge sits a massive Neolithic settlement known as Durrington Walls. Archaeologists have studied it for decades. People once lived there, gathered there, held rituals there, nothing out of the ordinary. Until scientists began scanning beneath the fields using ground-penetrating radar and advanced soil analysis. What appeared made absolutely no sense. 14 colossal pits arranged in a perfectly precise ring, so accurate it looked mechanically drafted. Could nature have done this? They ruled out sinkholes, too organized, animal traps, far too large, random chance impossible. So, researchers drilled deep cores into the earth to investigate. They analyzed ancient DNA, chemical signatures, and used luminescence dating to determine when the soil last saw sunlight. Every test pointed to the same conclusion. Humans intentionally created these pits around 2500 BCE. Even more incredible, they weren't dug over centuries. They were planned and executed as a single, coordinated project. Think about that. Over 4,000 years ago, long before metal tools, written language, or advanced mathematics, a community stood in an open field and decided to carve a perfect, mile-wide circle into the earth. And they did it, without drones, satellites, aerial views, or GPS. Just ropes, wooden stakes, memory, and an astonishing ability to think spatially. This pit circle may be one of the largest prehistoric constructions ever made in Britain, possibly even larger in scale than Stonehenge itself. And for thousands of years, it remained completely hidden. Farmers plowed above it. Visitors walked over it. Whole generations lived and died without knowing it was there. As for its purpose, archaeologists suspect the circle marked a sacred boundary, perhaps dividing ordinary land from spiritually potent ground. Some believe it represented the border between the living world and a realm beyond. Others think it outlined the edges of a vast ceremonial landscape that included Stonehenge as only one piece of a much larger design. But one fact is undeniable. The people who built it were not primitive. They understood geometry, scale, and complex planning, and they achieved something extraordinary. Buried civilizations in other continents. here's where things become even more intriguing. This pattern, massive, ancient structures hidden for millennia and revealed only through modern technology, is appearing all around the world. In the Amazon rainforest, researchers spent more than 20 years conducting ground expeditions. 2 decades of work in one of the harshest environments on Earth revealed valuable information, but the picture was far from complete. They knew people had lived there. They knew settlements existed. But the jungle concealed the true scale of what lay beneath. Everything changed when they turned to LiDAR. LiDAR is a laser-based scanning system that sends millions of pulses from an aircraft. Each pulse bounces off the ground, mapping the terrain beneath the canopy. It digitally removes the forest and reveals whatever is underneath. After scanning more than 100 square miles, the results stunned the researchers. Over 6,000 rectangular earthen platforms appeared, carefully shaped by human hands and used as homes and public structures. There were agricultural terraces carved into hillsides with remarkable engineering skill, drainage channels, expertly managed farmland, and roads, wide, straight roads that cut through the jungle in unwavering lines. But these roads did something nature never does. They did not follow rivers, they did not bend around obstacles, and they crossed each other at perfect right angles, forming a complete grid system deep within the Amazon. At least 15 large settlements emerged from the LiDAR data, all linked by this sophisticated road network. These communities belonged to the Kasarabi culture, often grouped under the broader categories of the Kilmop and Upanu cultural complexes, which thrived roughly from 500 BCE to 600 CE. They cultivated maize and sweet potatoes, redirected rivers, reshaped the land, and supported populations far larger than scientists once believed possible in the rainforest. Not dozens, not hundreds, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. For centuries, the Amazon was thought to be pristine and untouched. It was not. It was managed, engineered, and densely inhabited. And no one knew until a laser revealed it. The Nazca lines the world never knew about. From the Amazon, we move west into the Peruvian desert, home to one of archaeology's most famous and perplexing wonders, the Nazca lines. If you have ever seen photos, you know them. Massive figures carved into the desert floor. A hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, and geometric shapes stretching for miles. They are so large that they can only be seen properly from the sky. For decades, archaeologists wondered how the Nazca people created these figures without aerial vantage points, why they made them, and whether more remained undiscovered. That last question now has an answer. Yes, hundreds more. Traditional field mapping was slow and limited. Researchers could spend years walking small sections of desert and still miss faint lines invisible to the human eye. So, scientists trained an artificial intelligence model to search for patterns in aerial and drone imagery. They fed the AI terabytes of photographs and taught it how Nazca geoglyphs behave. The angles, the edges, the way the lines contrast against the desert surface. Then they set it loose. In just 6 months, the AI identified 303 previously unknown geoglyphs, nearly doubling the number of known Nazca figures in less than half a year. Some were small, just a few feet across, lying right next to the famous giants. Entire new categories of designs appeared, representing styles and motifs no researcher had ever documented. Many had been sitting in plain sight for centuries, missed by every human observer who passed them. With this expanded catalog, scientists can finally test new theories about their purpose. Current evidence suggests the lines were not decorative messages or alien signals, but ceremonial pathways. Routes walked during rituals, connecting communities across a sacred landscape. 303 new figures. 6 months, 1 AI. A sacred land before Stonehenge. Meanwhile, back in Britain, the same technologies began reshaping our understanding of Stonehenge itself. The stones did not rise from an empty plain, far from it. New findings show that Salisbury Plain was a spiritually charged landscape centuries before the first stones were placed. One of the earliest features is a site known as Robin Hood's Ball, dating to around 3600 BCE, about 500 years before Stonehenge. Archaeologists classify it as a causewayed enclosure, not a fortress, not a defensive wall, but a ring of interrupted ditches and banks with deliberate gaps between the segments. Those openings were intentional. This was not a structure designed to keep people out. It was an invitation to come in. Researchers believe it served as a communal gathering place, hosting meetings, feasts, ceremonies, and social events that strengthened early societies. Later, during construction work at Larkhill, northeast of Stonehenge, archaeologists surveyed the area before new military housing was built. They uncovered another fully buried causewayed enclosure, previously unknown, and as excavation continued, the findings multiplied. They uncovered hundreds of flint tools, beautifully crafted leaf-shaped arrowheads, fragments of human skulls, antler tools worn down from heavy use, and pottery, styles from many different places. Each type reflected the distinct traditions of the communities who made them. This matters because pottery in the ancient world functioned like a fingerprint. Each community crafted vessels in its own distinct style. Finding multiple styles in a single location means that multiple groups were gathering there, each bringing their own identities, traditions, and cultural markers. Stonehenge was not the beginning of something. It was the continuation of something, a landscape already rich with memory, already used for ceremony, already mapped with human meaning, long before the famous stones were ever raised. Where the stones came from, and why it matters. Stonehenge is built from two main types of stone. The massive blocks forming the iconic outer ring are called sarsens, each weighing around 25 tons, roughly the weight of 3 African elephants. The heel stone alone weighs about 30 tons. The smaller interior stones are known as blue stones. They are not truly blue, they simply show a bluish tint when freshly broken, and the name persisted. These stones came from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, about 150 miles away. The largest of the blue stones, the altar stone, weighs around 6 tons. For nearly a century, scholars assumed the altar stone came from Wales as well. It made sense. If they were already transporting stones from the Preseli Hills, perhaps they brought one more along. That assumption collapsed in 2018. Using advanced geochemical analysis, essentially reading the molecular fingerprint of the rock, researchers traced the altar stone's origin not to Wales, but to Scotland, specifically the Orcadian Basin in northeastern Scotland, over 400 miles from Stonehenge. 400 miles. 6 tons of stone, no wheels. The wheel existed in Mesopotamia at this time, but it had not reached Britain. There were no vehicles, no cranes, no engineered roads spanning the island. How the stone was transported remains a genuine mystery. The ice road theory, suggesting that glaciers or frozen winter pathways allowed the stones to slide, was disproven. The Neolithic climate was warmer than today. The river raft theory fails because sarsen stones are too heavy and would immediately sink. The honest conclusion is that we do not yet know. Ropes, human strength, wooden sledges, rollers, and a level of determination that borders on unimaginable likely played a role. The sarsen stones themselves were also traced through geochemical testing. They were not hauled from Marlborough Downs, as long believed, but from West Woods, a forest about 19 miles from Stonehenge. Excavations in the Prehistoric Hills, particularly at a site called Wan Mon, revealed empty stone sockets, evidence that standing stones had once been removed. There had been a stone circle there, and evidence strongly suggests that several of Stonehenge's bluestones originally stood in that older monument before being relocated to Salisbury Plain. Stonehenge was not built solely from raw material. Parts of it were constructed from the dismantled remains of an even older, long-forgotten monument. How Stonehenge was actually built and who lived there. Stonehenge was not built in a single moment. Construction spanned roughly 1,000 years, carried out in stages by dozens of generations of builders. Around 3,100 BCE, workers dug a circular ditch, raised wooden posts inside it, and established cremation pits. This became the oldest known cremation cemetery in Britain. Around 2,600 BCE, the bluestones arrived from Wales. Some scholars believe the stones were thought to possess healing powers, which might explain the monumental effort required to transport them 150 miles. Around 2,500 BCE, the great sarsen stones were brought to the site. These formed the outer ring and the towering trilithons, two upright stones capped by a horizontal lintel, the shape recognized worldwide. A recent laser scan of the monument revealed something fascinating. The stones are not evenly finished. The northeast side, facing the midsummer sunrise, and the interior faces of the central trilithons were carved with the greatest care. The builders were not simply erecting rocks. They were sculpting a sacred space with intentional directionality. Constructing Stonehenge required an estimated 20 million hours of labor. A human lifetime contains roughly 700,000 hours. One person working non-stop from birth to death would still need nearly 29 lifetimes to complete the monument. Accounting for sleep, food, illness, and real life, the project likely required about 57 generations of coordinated effort, over a millennium of work. Naturally, these builders needed places to live. Near Stonehenge, archaeologists uncovered one of the earliest settlements on the plain. A Mesolithic home dating to around 4,300 BCE. Its walls were built around a fallen tree trunk and reinforced with flint. A cobbled floor lined the pit left by the roots. A roof of animal hides sheltered the interior. Heating was achieved ingeniously. Stones were heated outside, then carried indoors to radiate warmth safely through the night, an early form of thermal storage thousands of years before radiators. At Durrington Walls, a village near Stonehenge, researchers found oval houses built on chalk foundations. White chalk walls reflected firelight. Wicker furniture, clay jars, wooden beds, and central hearths created warm, functional homes. Experimental archaeologists reconstructed several of these houses using authentic methods: 20 tons of chalk, 5,000 hazel rods, and 3 tons of straw. The result? Bright interiors, warm rooms, thoughtfully designed living spaces. And when a loaf of bread was baked in the reconstruction, the taste surprised everyone. It was genuinely good. These were not primitive people. They had craft, comfort, and community, and they built one of the greatest monuments in human history. The real reason Stonehenge was built. This is the question everyone asks. The solar calendar theory is well supported. Stonehenge aligns precisely with the movements of the sun. On the summer solstice, the sunrise lines up with the heel stone, sending light straight into the monument. On the winter solstice, the setting sun aligns with the altar stone. For communities without clocks or written calendars, solstices were vital. They marked planting and harvest seasons, warned of coming hardship, and signaled the return of warmth. Stonehenge tracked time on a cosmic scale. Some researchers believe it was also a healing center. Bluestone fragments appear intentionally chipped. Visitors traveled from across Britain, many of them evidently sick or injured. But the most recent theory, made more compelling by the altar stone's Scottish origin, goes further. Around 2500 BCE, Britain was undergoing rapid cultural change. A new people, known as the Beaker culture, were arriving from regions of the Netherlands and Germany. Over time, their arrival contributed to one of the largest population shifts in British prehistory. The descendants of older Neolithic farming communities found their world changing dramatically. Researchers now believe Stonehenge may have been a response to this upheaval. Scottish communities used recumbent stones in their sacred circles. By transporting a massive Scottish stone to the heart of Stonehenge, the builders may have been making a profound statement of unity, an invitation to every community across Britain. A monument declaring, "We are one people. We belong here. This land remembers us." Aligned with the setting sun, the altar stone may have symbolized more than cosmology. It may have linked communities, the living and the dead, the present and the ancient memory of the land. What all these discoveries have in common. Each time new technology is applied to the ancient world, AI, LiDAR, luminescence dating, geochemical fingerprinting, the same pattern emerges. We learn that the ancient world was far bigger than we imagined. The pit circle at Durrington Walls is larger than Stonehenge itself. Amazonian cities may have housed hundreds of thousands. The Nazca lines number hundreds more than once believed. The altar stone traveled 400 miles. Salisbury Plain was sacred for 500 years before Stonehenge existed. The better our technology becomes, the larger and more sophisticated the ancient world reveals itself to be. These people had no metal tools, no written language, no engines, and no advanced mathematics. They had observation, patience, creativity, and, most importantly, shared meaning. A collective belief in something greater than themselves. A belief powerful enough to move mountains across an island and sustain a project for 57 generations. The pits around Durrington Walls are still beneath the grass today, just outside the fence at Stonehenge. You could stand on them and never realize what lies below. But now we know, and the more we learn, the clearer it becomes. These people were not so different from us. They worried, they celebrated, they longed to belong. And above all, they wanted to be remembered.